Echoes of the Void, Commander Elena. Sokolov had been aboard the International Space Station, ISS, for 6 months, conducting routine maintenance and experiments. The work was monotonous at times, but it was a far cry from the chaos of Earth. Up here, there was a quiet beauty, a tranquility, that came with orbiting the planet in the silence of space. 74%. It was during one of these routine checks, while floating through the Columbus module, that she first noticed something strange. A faint, high-pitched sound, almost like a distant echo, reverberated through her helmet. It was easy to dismiss as a trick of the mind. Sounds didn't travel in space, after all, and the station's equipment often made strange noises. But something about this sound was different, unsettling in a way she couldn't quite place. "Elena, do you copy?" The voice of her crewmate. Dr. Samuel Clark crackled over the comms, pulling her from her thoughts. "Copy, Sam," she replied, her voice steady. "Just finishing up here. Did you hear that strange noise earlier?" There was a pause, then a chuckle. "If I had $1 for every weird sound I've heard up here, I'd own NASA by now. Probably just the station settling. Happens all the time." Elena smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, you're probably right. See you in the lab." As she made her way to the laboratory module, the strange sound faded, replaced by the familiar hum of the station's life support systems. But the unease lingered. The ISS was home to a small crew: Elena, Sam, and 3 others. Lieutenant Marco Vasquez, Dr. Yuki Takahashi, and Commander Alice Brandt. They were a tight-knit team, having trained together for years, but the isolation of space could weigh heavily on anyone. Small tensions, minor disagreements, these things were normal, expected even, in such an environment. But over the next few days, something changed. It started with Sam. He complained of headaches, a persistent ringing in his ears that wouldn't go away. Elena dismissed it at first, attributing it to the stress of their mission. But when she found him hunched over in the lab, muttering to himself, she knew something was wrong. "Sam, are you okay?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. He looked up at her, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. I can't get it out of my head, Elena. The sound, it's everywhere. It's in the walls, in the air. I can hear it even when it's quiet." She frowned, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What? Sound? The one from earlier?" Sam nodded, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "It's getting louder. It's like a voice, but it's not saying anything, just echoing, over and over." Elena's unease deepened. She'd heard the sound too, but it had been so faint, so distant. Could it be that Sam was more sensitive to it? Or was something else at play? They decided to monitor him closely, keeping a record of his symptoms. But within a day, the others began to report similar experiences: headaches, ringing in the ears, and an overwhelming sense of unease. The sound was spreading, like a virus infecting their minds. Yuki was the next to succumb. She started hearing the sound during her sleep, waking up drenched in sweat, her eyes wide with terror. "It's not just a sound," she whispered to Elena one night, her voice trembling. "It's inside me. I can feel it. Oh, crawling in my brain." Elena's own headaches had started by then, a dull throb that pulsed in time with the strange echoes. The sound seemed to grow louder with each passing hour, burrowing deeper into her mind. She couldn't concentrate, couldn't think. The others were faring even worse. Marco had become erratic, lashing out at anyone who came near, while Alice had withdrawn completely, staring blankly out the station's windows as if trying to escape the nightmare that was closing in around them. And then, one by one, they began to change. Sam was the first to collapse. Elena found him in the crew quarters, his body convulsing violently, blood trickling from his ears and nose. She tried to help him, but he shoved her away with unnatural strength, his eyes wild and vacant. "Elena, it's in me," he rasped before his body stiffened, and he fell still. She watched in horror as his eyes rolled back, his mouth opening in a silent scream. His body twitched, and for a moment, she thought he was dead. But then, impossibly, he moved, his limbs jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. He stood, his head lolling to the side, and turned to face her. But it wasn't Sam anymore. The thing that had taken him was hollow, empty, his eyes black pits, devoid of any humanity. It moved toward her, its jaw hanging open, and Elena stumbled back, heart pounding in her chest. She fled, locking herself in the lab. But the sound followed her, growing louder, more insistent. The Athers had succumbed too, Marco, had disappeared into the maintenance tunnels, his screams echoing through the station while Yuki had torn at her own skin, as if trying to dig the sound out of her head. Alice was still in the observation deck, unmoving, her eyes wide and unseeing. Elena's mind raced as she tried to understand what was happening. It was a disease, but not like anything she'd ever encountered. It was in the sound something, transmitted through the station's systems, or perhaps even through space itself. A signal maybe, but one that infected the brain, twisting the mind until there was nothing left but the echo. She knew she didn't have much time. The sound was relentless, pounding in her skull, driving her to the brink of madness. Her vision blurred, and she could feel it. Something slithering through her thoughts, consuming her from the inside. She couldn't let it take her. Not like it had taken the others. With trembling hands, she initiated the station's self-destruct sequence. The ISS was compromised, a floating tomb that could never return to Earth. If the disease spread beyond the station, if it reached the planet, there would be no stopping it. As the timer counted down, Elena felt her strength ebbing away. The sound was everywhere now, a cacophony of echoes that drowned out all reason. She sank to the floor, her vision darkening, her thoughts unraveling. In her final moments, she heard them, the voices of her crew, calling out to her, pleading, screaming, begging for release. But it wasn't them. Not anymore. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was the distant blue glow of Earth, a beautiful, unreachable memory, and then silence. The void of space. Inside, the disease remained, waiting. The ISS drifted in orbit, empty and dead, a silent echo in for the next unfortunate soul to venture too close to hear. The echo, to succumb to the void.